Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
The first thing I noticed when I walked into his office was that he'd replaced the vintage leather chair his father used with some trendy, ergonomic thing that looked like it belonged in a high-end podcast studio. The second thing was that he didn't stand up when I walked in, just sort of gave me this smirk, like he'd already made up his mind about me. His name was Travis Langford, 28 years old, fresh out of Stanford, wearing a blazer with sneakers, and using words like disruptive and synergize like they meant something. His father, Ronald Langford, the man who hired me 22 years ago, had officially stepped down the day before. And today, Travis got the keys to the kingdom. "Mark," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Glad you could come in." I sat down without waiting to be asked, mostly because if I had to play by the new rule book, I'd be out of this office before lunch. I figured I might as well stay on my terms for as long as I could. "My dad says you're one of the originals," he continued, tapping on his keyboard like he was coding a space shuttle but clearly just pretending to work. "He said you're old school. You built this place brick by brick. That's cool and all, but..." He paused, and here it came. "I'm building a digital-first future. I need digital thinkers only. Forward-facing, adaptive, agile minds. You understand, right?" I smiled. I didn't say anything for a second. Just let him sit in the silence, that awkward millennial silence that guys like him fill with TED Talk quotes and energy drink buzz. Finally, I stood up, shook his hand, limp and cold like a fish on ice, and said, "Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what you bring to the table." Then I walked out, not because I agreed, but because I already knew he just told me exactly what he planned to do. He hadn't fired me, but he'd fired a warning shot right between my eyes. And if there's one thing I've learned in 2 decades in corporate America, it's this: the new boss doesn't need to fire you to get rid of you. They just need to make you want to leave. By lunch, my access to the project dashboard had been revoked. That afternoon, my desk got moved to the East Wing, 2 floors down, near the interns and across from the vending machine that still $8 like it had a gambling problem. No official title change, no email from HR. Just a quiet shuffling into irrelevance. Nobody said a word to me about it. Not even Carl Bennett, our VP of operations and longtime backstabber in a Brooks Brothers suit. Carl was the kind of guy who shook your hand like a politician and then sent a follow-up email CCing HR before you'd even sat back down. He thrived under chaos, and Travis was handing it out like Halloween candy. I built the marketing team at Bright Lane Strategies from nothing. Back in 2003, we were running email campaigns manually, buying print ads, pitching clients over lunch in diners and smoke-filled conference rooms. I taught half of these kids how to use PowerPoint, and now they were building Instagram funnels and acting like they'd cracked the Da Vinci Code. I never needed to post about synergy on LinkedIn to understand what synergy was. I knew it when I saw it, in the numbers, in the growth, in the people. But none of that mattered now, because I had gray in my beard, and I didn't say crushing KPIs with a straight face. I was obsolete. I went home that night and told my wife, "Ellen, it's happening." She didn't ask what I meant. She knew. She's seen me stay up past midnight more nights than not, building decks, prepping pitches, flying out on red eyes for clients who would forget my name the next quarter. She's watched the company become part of our marriage, part of our family calendar. She said, "Do you want to fight it?" I told her I wasn't sure yet. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to let a guy who still called his mom for laundry tips walk in and erase 2 decades of my life without at least seeing how deep the route went. The next morning, I got in early, not to impress anyone, just force of habit. Travis rolled in around 10:30, late from some executive breakfast, and stood outside his office staring at his laptop like it was a microwave, and he couldn't remember how to defrost chicken. After about 5 minutes of watching him click at random, he knocked on Carl's door. Carl did that annoying chuckle laugh he always used when he didn't know the answer and said, "Have you tried rebooting?" I didn't say a word, just sipped my coffee and watched the show. What would you do if a punk like that walked in and tossed your entire career aside like old furniture? Would you fight? Would you walk? Would you burn the place down or wait until it collapsed under its own stupidity? Me? I started watching, listening, saving emails, remembering dates, names, who said what and when. Because when someone tells you you're old school, what they mean is you remember how things really work. And that's exactly what they're afraid of. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. It didn't happen all at once. No dramatic announcement. No marching band or security escort to the front door, just a slow, quiet shuffling, like being erased with a very soft pencil. The Monday after Travis's little speech, I opened my calendar to find that the weekly leadership sync had mysteriously vanished. No invite, no update, just gone. Then the marketing budget meeting, the one I used to run, was held without me. I found out about it 2 hours later when someone from finance forwarded me a spreadsheet and asked if these numbers looked right. I wrote back, wouldn't know. I wasn't invited. No one replied. By Wednesday, I'd started keeping a folder on my desktop called Miscellaneous. Inside it, every email that rubbed me the wrong way, every meeting I was excluded from, every copied phrase I recognized from a presentation I had written. Because here's the thing they never tell you in the brochures: when they decide you're obsolete, they don't take your badge right away. No, they let you rot in the corner first, so when they finally do it, they can say you were already out of the loop. The worst part? It wasn't Travis. Not directly. He was too green, too wrapped up in his image and his ego and his shiny shoes. It was Carl Bennett who wielded the knife. Carl, with his half-smile and his empty eyes, suddenly had a lot more to say in meetings. He started using phrases like agile pivots and streamlined value architecture, which meant absolutely nothing but sounded impressive enough to people who had no idea what real work looked like. He started sending me emails with phrases like, just looping you in for visibility, or per our chat, feel free to observe. Observe, like I was some kind of damn ghost haunting the company I helped build. And then there was Nikki. She'd been my junior 3 years ago, smart, ambitious, always eager to learn. And I'd taken the time to teach her the ropes. Not just the tools, but the rhythm of how a real campaign works. She used to ask questions like she meant them, stay late to polish pitch decks, and I truly thought she'd be the future of the department. Turns out, I was right, but not in the way I'd hoped. Now she was in the meetings I wasn't invited to. Now she was speaking in my voice, using my phrases, my frameworks, my timelines, but delivering them like they were hers. And everyone was clapping, especially Travis. He called her a breath of fresh perspective. I called her what she was, a well-trained echo with a short memory. I'm not going to pretend it didn't sting. It did. Watching her become the shiny new toy they passed around, praising her for ideas I'd incubated while eating leftovers at my desk. Yeah, that hurt like hell. But I didn't get angry. Not visibly. I smiled. I nodded. I said things like, glad to see the team building momentum, and she's really stepping up. Meanwhile, at night, I printed out email chains. I forwarded Slack messages to my personal email. I started saving old project files with metadata, date stamps, and revision notes. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was archiving. The HR check-in came Thursday afternoon. Julie, our HR business partner, booked it as a casual wellness sync. I'd known Julie for years. She used to bring her kid to company picnics, and we'd once carpooled to a conference in Denver, but she'd changed. Now, her eyes didn't quite meet mine, and every sentence felt like it had been run through legal 3 times. We just wanted to see how things are going for you lately, she said, smiling like she was reading it off a cue card. Are you feeling supported in your role? I said, absolutely. Couldn't be better. Which was exactly what they wanted. Because what they're fishing for in those meetings isn't your honesty, it's a mistake. A sign of frustration. Something they can write down and hand back to you in 3 months when they say, see, he wasn't adjusting to the transition. But I didn't give them anything. I knew the game. Hell, I taught parts of it. And now, I was playing it better than they could. At home, Ellen could tell I was off. She's known me since I was 21 and broke and still thought ambition was noble. We were brushing our teeth when she asked, you okay? I nodded. Then she put her hand on my arm and said, Mark, don't lie to me. So I told her. Not everything, not yet, but enough. She didn't offer solutions. She just said, don't let them take more than they already have. And that was enough for me. What most of these corporate kids don't realize is that when you've been around as long as I have, you've seen the cycles. The fads, the jargon, the reorganizations dressed up as revolutions. You've survived 3 CEOs, 5 market crashes, and a dozen rebrands. You don't just know how things work, you know how they break. And you know where the cracks form first. So I waited. I listened. I smiled. And I watched the cracks start to show. Because Travis, for all his digital-first nonsense, was still a kid with a 1,000-watt smile and a 5-watt brain. And sooner or later, someone was going to ask him a question he couldn't answer. When that happened, I planned to be standing right there. holding the answer in one hand and the receipts in the other. There's something beautifully tragic about watching someone walk confidently toward a cliff, smiling, waving, even dancing, completely unaware of the drop just past the horizon, especially when you've already tried to warn them once, maybe twice. And they looked at you like you were the janitor asking to join the board meeting. That's how it felt watching Travis push forward with the NovaStream campaign, the rebranded, overly stylized mess that used to be my idea, back when it actually made sense. 2 years ago, I built out a scalable model for B2B digital integrations, focused on performance marketing funnels tailored by industry verticals. It was clean, data-backed, built on scalable partnerships, and we had 3 pilot clients lined up and ready. But the board stalled it, budget shifted, and it ended up in the graveyard of half-buried proposals. Until now. Travis apparently dusted it off, renamed it NovaStream, added a few neon gradients and buzzwords like machine intelligent and immersive click spaces, and sold it to the company like he dreamed it up during his second espresso on a rooftop in Austin. The first red flag hit me right in the face. He had no idea who the customer was. He pulled our entire campaign strategy from a slide deck that looked like it had been built by a college intern on a sugar high. The targeting was so off it hurt. Instead of focusing on mid-sized logistics and real estate firms, which the data clearly supported, he chased lifestyle brands and DTC fitness platforms, folks who wouldn't have looked twice at us in a pitch meeting. His analytics model relied on vanity metrics, and the vendor he hired to run media buys was a company I blacklisted 4 years ago for inflating impressions with bot traffic. It was amateur hour, except the amateurs were running the show. I watched all of it happen from the outside. No one asked for my input. No one brought me into the planning sessions, even though half of the current playbook still had my initials on it. Nikki was listed as the strategy lead. I recognized 3 of my old frameworks in her overview, copied word for word. I almost said something. Almost. But instead, I leaned back, crossed my arms, and let it roll. Because sometimes the best way to prove someone wrong is to let them be right until it all comes crashing down. Launch day came with all the usual overhype and empty optimism. Travis gave some speech on the internal live stream about ushering in the next chapter of digital transformation, which meant absolutely nothing. But the younger folks clapped anyway, probably out of fear more than belief. Within 24 hours, we started seeing cracks. Bounce rates spiked. Conversions were non-existent. One client, a major apparel brand, pulled out of their test campaign before the first week ended. The tracking pixels hadn't been installed properly, and no one noticed until it was too late. But the real comedy came during the internal postmortem. Travis stood at the front of the glass conference room, red in the face, tie loose, hair slightly less perfect than usual, and blamed, I kid you not, legacy systems. He actually said, we're being slowed down by outdated workflows and people who can't adapt to digital velocity. He said this while looking directly at me. I didn't blink. Carl, standing next to him, nodded solemnly like a funeral director, adding, we need to assess which parts of the team are really ready for this next level. But here's what neither of them knew. The week before launch, I'd gotten lunch with Elaine Kim, one of our oldest clients and someone I'd built a relationship with back when we still had company holiday parties worth attending. She told me she was nervous about the new direction, didn't feel heard, and had been approached by a smaller competitor who actually seemed to know what they were doing. I told her, give it 2 weeks. I also spoke with Raj Patel, the head of marketing at another longtime account. He said, is anyone steering the ship over there? I said, funny you ask. Those conversations didn't go anywhere official. Not yet. But seeds had been planted, and I was watching where they would grow. Then something strange happened. Late Friday afternoon, I got an email from someone in accounting. I won't say their name. Not yet, but they'd been around almost as long as I had. The subject line said, FYI, for your eyes only. Inside was a PDF and a short message. Tell me this doesn't look off. It was an internal summary of our Q2 earnings that had been signed off by Travis 2 weeks earlier. The same week he'd been pitching NovaStream to the board as our most promising revenue path. The numbers looked good on the surface, almost too good. Then I saw it. Revenue from 3 upcoming contracts listed as closed won, even though 2 of them hadn't signed yet, and the third had quietly withdrawn their intent to renew. That's not just a rounding error. That's earnings manipulation. Now, was it intentional? Hard to say. Was it illegal? That depends on how it's reported publicly. But it was enough to raise eyebrows, and in my hands, enough to set fire to the castle if I wanted to. I didn't do anything with it that day. I just saved the file to my miscellaneous folder and locked it behind 2 passwords and a USB drive I kept on my keychain. Then I closed my laptop, walked past Travis's glass-walled office where he sat scrolling on his phone like a bored teenager, and headed home. That night, Ellen poured us both a drink. She didn't ask what was on my mind. She just handed me the glass and said, "You look like a man who's choosing between pulling the pin or waiting for the fire to catch." I smiled, because she was exactly right. Some men get pushed. Some men fall. And some men wait until the fall begins and then decide which way the story ends. There's a certain discipline in holding back the blow when everything in your gut is screaming to strike, a certain satisfaction in letting the rope unwind until the noose knots itself without you needing to pull, and that's exactly the rhythm I kept. I didn't rush it, didn't bark or swing or fire off accusations like some jaded ex-employee trying to claw back relevance. I played it slow, measured, the way a man plays poker when he already knows what everyone else is holding, and he's just waiting for the pot to grow fat enough to be worth flipping the table. The first thing I did was pick my cards carefully, not all at once, not loudly, just a few emails here, a few lines of copied metrics there, nothing flashy, just enough to raise questions in the right circles. I created a throwaway account, nothing traceable, used once from a public network, just long enough to send a redacted version of the campaign's launch failure to one of our client whisper networks. I knew how they gossiped, late-night Slack messages between CMOs, off-the-record calls between procurement leads, and I knew once that failure started echoing beyond our walls, it'd turn into a hum Travis couldn't mute. The second thing I did was invite an old friend to lunch, someone I hadn't seen in nearly a decade, but whose name still opened doors, Amanda Kessler. A senior investigative journalist now freelancing for a business weekly that still scared the hell out of Wall Street. She was sharp, skeptical, and didn't care about buzzwords or polished press releases. I took her to a quiet bistro 3 blocks from the office, ordered her favorite tea before she arrived, and opened with, "I'm not giving you a story, I'm giving you a map. Whether you follow it is up to you." Then I laid it out, carefully, hypothetically, always hypothetically, but specific enough that she knew I wasn't bluffing. She asked good questions, took even better notes. By the end of the meal, she'd asked for 3 names, all of which I had prepared, all of which were already watching Travis's car crash in slow motion from different angles. Then I made the quietest move of them all. I reached out to Allison Drake, legal counsel to the board, and someone who used to pull all-nighters in the same freezing marketing conference rooms I once ran back, when Bright Lane had 10 employees and 0 buzzwords. I didn't call her at work. I called her personal number, asked to meet at a coffee shop far from downtown, and told her everything carefully, cleanly, with evidence, not opinion. She listened like a lawyer listens, arms crossed, mouth tight, no interruptions. But I could see the math running behind her eyes. She knew the implications of that misreported earnings file, and more importantly, she knew that if it ever surfaced publicly and the board hadn't acted, it could cost all of them more than reputations. And so, I pulled the pin. I forwarded the original file, the real one, unedited, to Allison, timestamped and cross-referenced with internal calendars, approval chains, and a line from Travis's own slide deck that proved he'd knowingly exaggerated unclosed deals. I attached a timeline of communication from the accounting team that showed he'd been warned about the classification, and I included screenshots of Slack threads where Carl Bennett encouraged rounding up figures to show positive momentum. I didn't add commentary. I didn't make demands. I let the numbers speak. The very next morning, I got an email from HR. Subject, Performance Alignment Discussion, Confidential. Which is corporate for, "We're about to fire you, but we want to do it legally." They scheduled me for Friday, 2 p.m. classic tactic, late enough that no one's paying attention, close enough to the weekend that fallout dies before Monday. But I'd been ready for this moment since the day Travis told me I was old school. I didn't reply to the email. I just packed my folder, black, leather, thick enough to sink a canoe if dropped into water, and walked into that meeting room like I'd just gotten promoted. Julie from HR sat at the head of the table, flanked by Carl on her right and some compliance guy I didn't recognize on her left. They greeted me with tense smiles, clearly expecting some combination of denial, groveling, or passive resignation. Instead, I slid the folder onto the table, opened it to the first page, and said, "Before we begin, I think you'll want to review these." The look on Carl's face when he saw what was inside, email chains with his name, margin notes with his initials, projections that contradicted public statements, was something I'll remember longer than my first paycheck. He flipped pages like a man trying to erase his fingerprints from a crime scene, then froze as he hit the appendix. The color drained from his face in real time. Julie asked, "Where did this come from?" I answered, "Internal servers. Everything dated, backed up, and within retention guidelines." The compliance guy, quiet until that point, suddenly sat straighter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten lawsuits. I just made it clear that the people I'd spoken to had more than concerns, they had options. And if this company wanted to make me a scapegoat, I'd make sure they needed a bigger fireproof filing cabinet. I let that sit for a moment, then leaned back in my chair and asked, "So should we still have that performance discussion?" Julie mumbled something about rescheduling. Carl didn't say a word. He just kept staring at the documents like they might start burning on their own. I stood, straightened my jacket, and walked out, not like a man fleeing a fight, but like a man who knew he'd just set the boardroom temperature 20 degrees colder without lifting a single finger. Revenge, people say, is a dish best served cold, but that's the thing most people get wrong. It's not a dish. It's a deck of cards. You don't serve it. You build it quietly, methodically, piece by piece. And when you play it right, you don't have to shout. You don't even have to win the hand. You just make sure the other guy realizes, far too late, that the whole damn game was rigged from the start. And I wasn't done playing. Not yet. When the building shakes, it doesn't always start with sirens or shouts or broken glass. Sometimes it begins with silence, the kind that settles across departments like a fog that no one wants to acknowledge. The kind of quiet you only hear when people are afraid to be the next one called into the wrong meeting with the wrong people. That was the mood the Monday after I dropped the folder. No morning smiles in the hallway. No over-caffeinated chatter in the kitchen about weekend soccer games or whatever binge-worthy show was keeping the interns sleep-deprived. Just tension. Heavy. Thick. Palpable. You could practically smell the anxiety coming off Carl Bennett's starched shirt as he marched into a closed-door meeting with 3 board members and didn't come back out for almost 2 hours. By noon, the whispers started. Something about misstatements and quarterly filings, a possible board inquiry. One rumor said a compliance audit team had been flown in from out of state. I didn't fan the flames. I didn't need to. The fire was already burning, and it wasn't mine to manage anymore. Travis, meanwhile, was nowhere to be seen. His office lights stayed off for 2 days straight. One of the junior designers swore she saw him leaving through the parking garage with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder like he was skipping town ahead of a hurricane. On Wednesday morning, Carl's name disappeared from the staff directory. Just like that. Gone. No farewell memo, no awkward all-hands call where he thanks the team and lies through his teeth about exciting new chapters. Just silence. I later heard through one of my quieter allies in finance that Carl had agreed to a resignation deal, one that included enough hush money to keep him from lawyering up but not enough to wipe the panic out of his eyes. He'd known. Maybe not all the details, maybe not the numbers Travis had doctored, but enough to know he'd let a kid with no discipline run the company into a wall and hadn't lifted a finger to stop it. Julie from HR went on leave 2 days later, personal reasons, according to the internal announcement, though everyone knew that meant she'd been benched until the legal team figured out who had dropped the ball and just how badly it had bounced. By Friday, the board made it official. Travis Langford was placed on indefinite administrative leave pending further investigation. No timeline. No guarantees. Just corporate code for, "We're cutting him loose the second our lawyers find a clean enough exit." I was called into one final meeting, this time with Allison Drake and 2 board members I'd only seen from afar in town halls and investor calls. They offered me a role, strategic advisory partner, which I'm pretty sure translates to token elder statesman we trot out to calm nervous clients. They said I had institutional knowledge, trust, legacy influence. I thanked them politely, declined just as politely, and told them that my calendar was full, which was technically true. Because while the company I'd given 2 decades to was collapsing under the weight of its own arrogance, I'd already signed papers somewhere else. 2 weeks earlier, while Travis was still polishing his brand and misreporting revenue, I'd had a dinner meeting with Raj Patel, one of Brightlane's oldest clients and one of the few people left in the industry who remembered how I used to work when this whole game was still played face-to-face, not filtered through apps and avatars. Raj had been fed up with the new generation of marketing fluff and hollow data science without substance. He was starting something new, lean, sharp, built on trust and execution, and he wanted me in. I didn't hesitate. Not because I needed revenge, but because I needed purpose again. And because, deep down, I wanted to build something from scratch, something I didn't have to compromise just to survive in. So I walked. Not with a box of my things or a forced handshake in the lobby. I just walked out during lunch on a Tuesday, nodded at the receptionist, and didn't look back. I had a better office now, smaller, sure, and with cheaper furniture, but it had something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet, clarity, purpose. And the first time I logged into our new Slack workspace, my welcome message wasn't a pre-written HR script. It was a joke from Raj. Guess old school ain't dead yet. A week later, I saw the news clip. It played on mute in the corner of the cafe I'd taken to working from on Fridays. Travis's face, looking pale and exhausted, walking briskly past a crowd of reporters outside a courthouse. The caption read, "Langford under SEC review following allegations of earnings misreporting." I took a sip of my coffee and didn't say a word. Somewhere in my bag, the USB drive with the original folder still sat, encrypted, untouched, unnecessary now. Ellen called me that night while I was locking up the new office. She asked how the day went, and I told her, smooth. She laughed and said, "You sound lighter." I was. I am. But not because of what I took down, because of what I walked away from. He was right about one thing. I am old school. The kind of old school that shows up early, stays late, answers questions even when it's inconvenient. The kind of old school that remembers birthdays and follows up on vendor delays and proofreads contracts even when it's not my job. The kind of old school that builds kingdoms with sweat and silence and burns them down when kids forget who built the damn walls. Was I a hero? Or just another corporate shark who finally grew fangs of his own? Depends on who you ask. And whether they were ever dumb enough to bet against me.